Is the Smart Buildings Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 400. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 400 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we are going to be going through measurement and verification and energy auditing. So this is going to be another one of our Learning Together series. These are a series where I go and I explore a topic from, not understanding it at all, or the perspective of not understanding it at all. And I kind of go and say, this is how I found the information. This is how I learn it. This is how I apply it. So we learn these topics together. As always, everything will be available within about an hour from now at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/400. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/400. I do want to take one brief second and just thank all of you who have listened to us over the years. I mean, those of you who have been listening since I did the episode in the hotel room under the sheet because the folks in the hotel rooms around us were being really loud, but I got that episode in all the way to episode 1 where I was so freaking uncomfortable to be doing a podcast all the way up to now. So thank you for going on this journey with us. 400 episodes is pretty awesome. Let's see if we can provide some great value for you today. As always, this is a live show. So if you're watching me on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook right now, then you might get a shout out like Austin does for bringing up congrats on 400. Well, Austin, thank you for listening to us. So those of you who want to engage with the show and ask questions as we move through this episode, definitely go and ask those questions in the chat. This is a topic that I don't see a lot of people talking about right now, but I am telling you all, please listen. No matter how you feel about the politics of sustainability, no matter how you feel about the politics of energy, I'm not going to touch that, not going to step into it. The reality is there is about to be a floodgates unleashed on the retrofit market in the forms of tax deductions, in the form of energy regulations, in the form of sustainability regulations, ESG reporting. All of that stuff is seeming like it's going to start hitting in 2023 and really ramp up in 2024. So it's really important that you understand M&V, you understand auditing, you understand these things so that if you are tech, you can really build that skill set that's going to help you out to be more valuable. If you're in sales, you can have these conversations with your customers right now. And if you're in operations, you can start thinking about what can I do on my own potentially as a building operator or as a building engineer to go and hit our sustainability goals, hit our energy reduction goals, those kind of things. Avoid, fines and things like that. So let's kick it off first with what is measurement and verification. Now, I've read a bunch of definitions of measurement and verification. The one I really liked was the process of measuring and verifying before and after states of some sort of change. Now, measurement and verification is usually synonymous with some form of energy conservation measure in the retrofit space. But what a lot of folks also don't realize is measurement and verification is also in the new construction space. Oftentimes to be compliant with, for example, ASHRAE 90.1, which one of the big tax incentives in the US is tied to that, just pay attention to that. You have to go and measure and verify your baseline versus your reported whatever it is you're measuring. In the case of this podcast, it's going to be primarily focused on energy, primarily also electrical energy. Just for simplicity's sake, it's a lot easier to talk about kilowatt hours than it is to talk about therms and all gallons of water, stuff like that. But that can be measured and verified and affected through EEMs, which are energy. What are EEMs off the top of my head? Oh my gosh. Energy efficiency measures, and ECMs. So that's the ASHRAE term, EEMs, and ECMs, energy conservation measures. So let's dive into M&V. Then we're going to talk about how to do M&V. We're going to give some examples of IPMVP models A and Charlie, so Alpha and Charlie. And then we're going to go into auditing. And we're going to talk about the standard audits, kind of just across the board audits. Then we're going to look at the standard 211 ASHRAE audits, level 1 through 3. Along the way, if you have any questions, just ask. And thank you, Vikram, for saying congratulations. I appreciate that. So what is M&V? Measurement verification is a tool that is utilized by energy auditors, energy managers, etc., to go and determine the effect of a design to performance. So, a design model to actual performance, or in the case we're most likely going to experience it, energy conservation measures, either as part of an energy savings contract or as just part of a standalone project. We'll dive into ESCOs probably in another podcast. ESCO is Energy Savings Contracting Organization. If I remember the acronym right. There's so many freaking acronyms in this industry. Oh my gosh. But IPMVP, that is kind of the gold standard for measurement verification. You have 4 real approaches to IPMVP. And they actually kind of lump into 2 separate categories. So you have A and B, which are single piece of equipment. So isolated from the building, you may do option A or B on lights. You may do option A or B on an air handler. Whereas C and D are whole building. So we'll talk about C and D in just a second. We're going to focus on A and B because A and B can be a little confusing. So A is single factor, and the easiest way to describe a single factor versus B, which is multi-factor, is to talk about lights. So if we are doing option A, energy conservation measure, and we're using option A for our M&V, then what we're going to do, let's go to kilowatt hours again, right? We're going to look at the kilowatt hour reduction by going and doing something to the lights. So maybe it's occupancy. So we're driving lights off of occupancy. Maybe it's occupied hours. Maybe it is light density. We're changing a single variable with that ECM. So this is a very common approach, and it's nice in a way that it makes it very simple. And the contractor executing this ECM is not responsible for all these additional variables. What would that look like? That is option B, which is multi-factor, multi-variable. So let's say we did the lights, but not only did we look at, kilowatt hour draw on the lights, we also looked at occupancy. We also looked at operating hours. Maybe we looked at light fixture density. Maybe we looked at fixture type. These are all multiple factors that come into play in our energy conservation measure. And guess what? The contractor is responsible for those different factors. That's why you tend to see in a non-ESCO scenario a lot of option A. It's pretty quick hit. It's a lower cost from an M&V perspective, and it's something that is easier to implement. So everyone kind of clear with what option A is? If you're not, just go and ask in the chat. Option B would be, as I mentioned, doing lighting, but you would also be taking multiple factors in. Another example of option B would be something like going and implementing a rooftop retrofit where you're resetting DAT, but we're also looking at like cooling design days. We're also looking at economizer position. We're also looking at, relative humidity. All of these things affect that temperature transfer from the entering and leaving side of the coil. So multiple factors that you could potentially have to go and impact. All right, so then we go to C and D. This is where we shift to whole building. If you've ever done Energy Star, you've done kind of a C, which is baseline and reporting. Granted, you're doing really the baseline on Energy Star. You're not really doing the reporting. But essentially what you do is you gather 12 months of utility bills and you come up with what are we going to impact. Maybe we're doing a lighting retrofit. Maybe we're doing a central plant retrofit, whatever we're doing. And what you do is you have your baseline, which we're just going to say is 100 kilowatt hours, right? For each month. I know buildings are going to use more than 100 kilowatt hours, but bear with me because we're going to do simple math. So each month you do 100 kilowatt hours. That's what is that, like $18, something like that. So you do $18 utility bill each month, and your goal is to reduce that by 10% through maybe a central plant retrofit or something. Well, what we're doing now is we have to take in a bunch of different factors. These are called regression variables. And these things like occupancy, outdoor air temperature, enthalpy load, etc. There's a variety of factors that can go in, because when you do your baseline, it would be stupid easy, right? To go and month by month, you're like, hey, we're going to reduce this by 10%. And you say half the building cannot be used. And of course, you're going to reduce by 10%. Half the building isn't being conditioned, isn't being used. So that's where you have to take into account those regression factors when you're doing both your baseline and your reporting, so that you are accounting for those outside influences that make things not apples to apples. It's really important with option C. And then option D is modeling. This is often required as part of, it is required as part of new builds. It's starting to be required as part of retrofit, depending on the size. Per ASHRAE 90.1, you could do prescriptive or performance. We've talked about 90.1 in the past, right? But this model is going to go, and what's going to happen with this model is you're going to go and have the ability to essentially define the building envelope, define the loads, define the occupancy. You're going to define all of this. And then you can use this model in a couple different ways. Like in the 179 Delta tax deduction, you can build out your model according to the 90.1, ASHRAE 90.1 2007 standard right now. You can build out your model, and then you could show a reduction in energy use intensity, EUI. And for every, I think it starts at 20%, but for every 10%, it's essentially $1 if you meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. And you can then get that tax deduction as a building owner and pass that on to your contractors, pass that on to your engineers, etc. But that all depends on doing option D, M&V. So it's something we're going to talk about in a future episode. It is pretty important to understand. Energy conservation measures. We're going to do a whole nother episode on energy conservation measures. We're going to talk about energy conservation measures, and we're going to kind of explore guideline 36 a little deeper than we did in our previous guideline 36 episode. So how do we do M&V? It's pretty straightforward. We establish our baseline, whether that is for a piece of equipment, like in the case of lighting, we would put a meter on the distribution panel that the lighting circuits is on. We might totalize up those circuits, or if the circuits of that distribution panel are dedicated to lighting, then we may just grab the coming into the panel. We've got to account for power factor, line loss, all that jazz. So where we place the meter does matter. But we meter it, we establish our baseline, and then we calculate, like, what are we going to save? What do we project saving? So if we're going to turn off half the lights, what do we project as far as savings? And then we implement our IPMVP model to go and validate those savings. Now, the key point that I want to make here that I've seen things fall apart on is where folks don't factor in the business mission when they are doing an energy conservation measure. If you've ever been in a hospital and you've been in an operating room, you know that they keep those pretty cold and pretty low to mid relative humidity. They try to control that environment to reduce infection rates. A lot of air changes in an operating room, 20 to 30 an hour versus, 3 to 4 in a traditional building space. So we could implement an energy conservation measure that raises the temperature to 72 to save energy. We could implement a energy conservation measure that reduces the air changes to 5 from 30, and we would save a lot of energy. But we would dramatically impact the core mission of the customer. We'd impact patient life safety. We'd impact business continuity. So whenever you do an ECM, do not get so caught up in just achieving these energy goals that you dismiss why the heck we're doing what we're doing in the first place. So if you're in a hospital or you're in a classroom or you're in, a lab environment, take into account the business use of that space when implementing energy conservation measures. I've seen a lot of schools shift their lighting to lighting that was not good for students, for their eyes. I've seen some schools implement warm instead of white light. So instead of cool light, they've implemented warm light, and that had an effect on student attentiveness. I've seen a variety of things happen in my time, and we definitely want to make sure that we're factoring that in. So let's talk about auditing now for just a little bit. So there's kind of this bucket of audits. And if you really think about an audit, there's a preliminary audit, and then there's a detailed energy audit. And if you look at standard 211, which, I can't share these things because they're copyrighted, but you can go and find the read-only version of 211. It's not very difficult considering ASHRAE gives access to their read-only. You just literally type in read-only guideline 211-2018. At the time of this recording, 2018 is the version. But you type that in, ideally not leaving this podcast stream while doing that. But you type that in and you go to section 5, and section 5 is going to, it's going to start with kind of what's in scope. And then it's going to go through the procedures through level 1 through level 3. So level 1 is our very, very basic walkthrough, collect the bills, kind of try to figure out. So you do a site visit, you identify and qualify any energy efficiency measures. You're going to go and kind of make sure your data is right, do some QA, quality assurance stuff, and then you present the results with recommendations. So doing this energy use analysis, it's not terribly difficult for level 1. You just collect utility bills, basically what you do for Energy Star, right? Pretty straightforward. Then you calculate that energy use intensity, and then you go and kind of figure out what can we do. So you could do energy efficiency measures. There's a ton of them you can do. Like I said, we're going to do an episode where we talk through that. But basically, long story short, you go through, you realize, this building has an energy use intensity 3x of their peers. How do you find that? You can look at CBEX, right? CBEX data? I think it's CBEX. And Energy Star data for EEUI, energy use intensity, which is basically square foot divided by kilowatt, if I remember correctly, or is it kilowatt divided by square foot? It's one of the two algorithms. But once you have that EUI, then you go and compare it to your peers, and you say, all right, well, most office buildings operate at this EUI, but you're at this EUI. Let's try to figure out what EEMs we can implement. You map those kind of out. You make sure your data is right, and then you present it to the customer, and hopefully they want to do something about it. That's kind of a level 1. Level 2 is going to be where you actually come in and you start metering things. You start putting your hobo meterings in. Like if I go to, where is it? Right here. There it is. You're going to start to look at a deep breakout of their utility bills. You're going to start looking at their O&M processes. You're going to start doing metering. You're going to start looking at systems. you're going to get pretty deep into the weeds of what their building energy utilization is within that building. Okay. So you're going to start to really peel the onion here. You're looking like a level 1 can be done same day typically. Level 2, you're talking a period of a couple weeks. And these are the most common ones I see happening are level 2s. Level 1s are like sales calls, basically. You can do that. A level 2 is more intense, and it's usually part of something, what's the word I'm looking for? It's usually part of oh my gosh, the term is slipping my brain. We used to do these all the time. Not a memorandum of understanding. It's basically a contract before a contract, but the term is slipping my head. I'm getting old. But you do that, and then once you have that information, you can go and once again create the calculated energy savings, your recommended EEMs. This is where you're going to get much deeper into the EEMs. So whereas level 1, you're going to be, here's the EEMs, here's what we think you could do, here's what we think you could say. Level 2, you're actually going to start doing like business calcs, like this is what we believe it would cost. This is kind of cost, and then here's benefit, here's ROI. You start to build this stuff out much deeper. And then level 3 is where you're going to do everything you did in level 1 and 2, but now you're actually starting to do deep analysis of your energy efficiency measures. So we're going to be starting to do things like a schematic design, so SDs, right? We're going to start laying out these things. This, you're usually under contract if you do this, because this is a lot of effort and work to do. But you'll be going and doing a deep analysis. You will then be going and doing a pretty well-defined life cycle effect of the EEMs versus just an immediate effect of EEMs. And you're going to be going and essentially building out an energy savings contract or an energy savings project. That's usually when I see level 3s. I see level 3s used for capital planning of major retrofits. I see them used as part of ESCO contracts, and I see them used as basically internal projects, but not so common, usually on like campus environments. All right, so we've gone through a lot here. I'm going to see Nahal put in the Energy Star portfolio manager into the LinkedIn chat. Thanks so much for doing that. Is definitely something that is useful. I encourage you all to go and refer to that. It will be something that you can use and you should use. Quite frankly, like, it's stupid easy to go on Google Earth, get a square footage measurement of a potential prospect site, go onto Energy Star, get the energy use intensity for similar square foot sites of the same vertical market, and then go to that customer, ask if you can look at their utility bills as a free service, and then you should real quickly, based on their square footage, ignoring garages, and their energy use, you should be able to give them a EUI and say like, hey, you're red, yellow, green. And if you're yellow or red and you have regulatory compliance, maybe you're in New York, maybe you're in California, let's go and solve this. It's a great way to create a quick hit sales call. And if you're on the operations side, I don't want you to feel left out. If you're a building operator, it's a great way internally to stack yourself against other buildings and say, okay, we can improve our energy use intensity. Do be aware if you're like a conference center or something, your energy may be cyclical. And so take that into effect or into account. So there you have it. That is a nutshell, a kind of like high level overview of M&V. It's a high level overview of auditing. We're going to be doing a deeper dive on M&V. I'm going to put together something and we're going to go through that probably as a webinar. Same with auditing. We're probably going to do a webinar on that as well. Our free webinars. We haven't done those in a while. And we're going to do an Inflation Reduction Act 179 Delta training, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about that and how to take best advantage of that. As always, everything's going to be available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/400. If you're going to be at AHR Expo, please swing by our booth at Bravo Charlie 1824. Once again, that's Bravo Charlie 1824. We're directly across from Distech. So come and find us. We're selling some shirts for charity, for a veterans charity. So I encourage you to do that and come meet the team. I'd like to meet you. It'd be great to see you. Our whole team will be there. So yeah, let me see if we got any questions on the different platforms about M&V and auditing. So I'm going to start by looking at LinkedIn. Let's see if we have any questions there. All right, we're good to go there. Let's take a look at YouTube. And let's take a look at Facebook. Well, no question. We're good there. And no questions on Facebook. All righty. Well, with that, folks, as always, you can post on any of these streams after the fact and ask questions if you're watching it. Like I said, in about an hour, everything will be available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/400. If you are going to be at AHR, definitely stop by. I'd like to see you. And remember, don't forget to take advantage of our free technical skill assessments. A lot of you had training budgets open up this year, and you need to get your people trained. We have had 20,000 people go through our free technical skills assessment, pinpoints exactly what you do and do not know. And if you choose to train with us, great, awesome. If you choose not to train with us, you'll still have those results for you or your team. So I encourage you, that link to that will be at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/400. Thanks so much, everybody. And on Friday, what we're going to be discussing is I want to go and do another training on PID loops, because it feels like everyone messes those up all the time. So I want to do a training on that. And I also want to do an upcoming training on BACnet. So I'm going to be doing a screen share on Friday with PID. We're going to be looking at Workbench just because of its market share, not because we have any particular desire for any control system over another. We're just going to be utilizing it for an example. So we'll be talking about proportional integral derivative loops on Friday. And then next week sometime we'll be doing BACnet. And we'll also be tying into that M&V deeper dive, but that'll be a webinar. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all. If you haven't yet, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe. Like and share and comment on LinkedIn and Facebook, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. That definitely helps spread the word, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody. I look forward to talking to you all on Friday. Take care.